September 1997. Since the beginning of time, there's always been the smarter or the stronger individuals or small group of individuals that would lead the rest of the following crowd. And there always have been those people, a small group, whatever they are, that wanted to maybe expand so tremendously that they would actually be able to control the world. Going back as far as human life on this earth has been the same. The smarter, slicker, stronger, more dominant, aggressive cavemen dominated all of the caveman society. Then slowly we started to put together a thing called government and government bodies. Through the Roman Empire, we put together the governing bodies at that time, and it was the same deal. It was always some people behind the backs of other people putting together the move or the concept for one world government. And as we brought forward recently the information about one world government being put together under the title of New World Order, which is not a new title, it's an old title, as you will see. Those of us in the Patriot movement that jumped up and down and yelled about this so much that it's a non-representative government, and that in fact we'd all be dominated by a small group of people at the very top, and an unelected, non-representative situation controlling everybody, everyone of the world, will be controlled by a handful of dominant personalities worldwide. Now, when we started telling people about this a few years ago, everyone came forward, of course those that would like to shut us down, came forward and said, oh, you're crazy. Certainly there's no such thing as New World Order. When George Bush and Gorbachev from Russia talked about moving into the New World Order on the floor of the United Nations and in other presentations and speaking engagements, when these guys would speak about the New World Order, we were told a year or two later that, well, it didn't mean anything. You know, it was just, it's just kind of verbiage. You know, it's just a conversational term. That's all it was, Bob. Don't be silly. Nobody really plans to control the world in a small group. Well, what I'm about to show you, first off, the very beginning of this tape, before we get into the exotic weapons, I want to very briefly show you and finalize the argument as to whether there is a New World Order, how long it has been planned, how far it's been put together. I'm going to do it very easily. Very easily. First off, I want you to look at an interesting piece here. They had a the federal government did a monument, was under construction since Jimmy Carter's days, for FDR, Delano Roosevelt. And when they did the huge monuments, big monuments finished in just outside of Washington, D.C. itself, in the park, they did a whole day of presentations dedicating this new memorial. And it's huge granite blocks. It's several different displays all under one banner. And the one that has FDR himself sitting in a chair, in his wheelchair, with his little dog next to him, alongside of him at that particular memorial piece is an interesting carving. It's carved in granite. And it's a statement that FDR made about the New World Order. And when they showed this particular still, nobody ever showed it at all, any footage of this at all when they did the presentation on CNN News. Never showed you this. But I'm going to show it to you now. Let's get a look at that. So many years ago, FDR, You can say what you want to about him in any direction, any of the programs he did that you may not like. People have gone, you can argue everybody's position up one side, down the other over the last few years. However, FDR warned us back then of the small group of people that would call it a new order and would dominate all of mankind. Well, additionally, if in fact there is no New World Order planned now in the modern day, I wonder why the media personalities now are talking about the new role of the Army, the new role of our military, the Air Force, the Marines, all of them have a new role. They're telling us we no longer have to worry about Russia and communism. Yeah, right. We don't have to worry about communism. Give me a break. But while they're telling us this, they're telling us that we have a new role now in the world. Our military bases are shifting over. Let's watch this out of CNN, the all-time blunder done by some of the writers of the news staff just a few months ago in 1997. What is it this lady's referring to if there is no New World Order?
Well, in a moment, the U.S. military examines its changing role in a changing world. But first, a look at the nation's weather. Brightest this Armed Forces weekend. The United States military remains the force to be reckoned with worldwide. But how will it maintain its edge in a new world order? Kyoko Altman has more.
It is the best of times and the worst of times for the U.S. military as it celebrates this Armed Forces Day. With the collapse of the Soviet Empire and the U.S. triumph in the Persian Gulf, the American military now stands as the world's most powerful fighting machine.
I think we've got the greatest technology in the world, we've got great leaders, and we've got wonderful support personnel.
And yet the military is in turmoil, struggling to forge a new mission and a new culture to match the post-Cold War world.
As we stand at this pivot point, we have to ask, what type of military should we choose for the 21st century?
Lacking a superpower rival, America's military leaders now grapple with more subtle and unfamiliar threats. Terrorist attacks on U.S. forces and mounting evidence of Gulf War chemical weapon exposure have triggered new questions about how to protect soldiers.
U.S. military leaders have begun rethinking the basic strategies that have guided defense policy since World War II. On Monday, the Pentagon will lay out its blueprint for the 21st century.
The Pentagon plans to maintain its ability to fight two regional wars, but it wants a leaner and meaner force that relies more heavily on technology. To buy more new weapons, such as the Joint Strike Fighter, 60,000 active duty troops could be eliminated. In an era of shrinking budgets, the Pentagon hopes to streamline its support structure by contracting out everything from housing to medical operations.
And you know, 30 years ago, in the 60s, there was a fantastic little report done. Well, I say fantastic because it's amazing. There was a report called Report from Iron Mountain. I discovered this back in, I think it was early 94 sometime. Somebody brought it to my attention. I searched and finally found a book that has it, and it was the entire report of Iron Mountain. This report, which was actually sanctioned originally by John F. Kennedy, it was not finished until Kennedy had already been murdered. In this report, the basics of the whole thing was, what does the United States government have to do to maintain continuing control over the American people as we move into a one-world, non-combatant world without fear of war with Russia, Red China, and other previously existing enemies? The question that was asked of 15 brilliant scientists, these were people that covered everything from psychology, war, Department of Defense backgrounds, economy, economists, people that specialized in the study of world history. They covered every single facet of mankind's existence. And what would happen if all of a sudden we no longer had to worry, just did not have to worry about outsiders coming in across our borders, our boundaries, and attacking us. we had this big, wonderful, soft, lovely one-world government, how would the government still maintain a reason to even exist? You have to remember the reality, which is very spooky. The reality that government exists and government control and battle plans are made and ongoing military is always maintained is on the premise of a fear of invasion from the outside. That someone would come in from the outside and come over the borders of our sovereign nation and attack us. Well, the big deal is that this has always been, throughout the history of man, the fear of outside attack has always been the excuse for maintaining government and government controls. And of course, along with that comes all the weapon controls as well, and all the armies to do the controlling. See, but if there is no fear of war, no real fear, very, very serious fear, it has to be not just a fear of economic problems. It has to be a fear so severe that the people of any given nation, would actually fear for their lives and their very existence. The Egyptians maintained that. And when they didn't have things to occupy their people with, of war, they occupied them with other things, like unending enterprises, never-ending enterprises. The Egyptians would build pyramids. Generations after generations built pyramids, but when they got one done, they had to build another one. It was to occupy their minds and keep them doing something that they perceived to be a necessity, because the leadership at that time had convinced the Egyptians, as a matter of fact, that they were gods. That's probably the next step with our military, with our leadership and people in government. Start convincing us that they are gods. They'd love to have that. But the Egyptians, they had never-ending projects. When one pyramid was finished, they had to start another one. So, in this amazing report of Iron Mountain, what these characters did was they put together what were all the different needs to control, maintain control financially, economically, emotionally, militarily, socially, psychologically, to maintain control over Americans as we move into world government. Now, this report was completed 30 years ago. It was amazing. It's very, very interesting. I have that report available. The one thing was they said, well, if we don't have an army anymore in terms of real, an army that has to deal against, standing against outside possible invasions, we'll have to come up with a new enemy. So they made a list 30 years ago, and they said, what would really be a good idea probably would be to simply demonize certain groups in the United States of America. Cults, they said. We'll call them cults, these little groups and organizations. And if necessary, burn them in public as was done with the witches in the old days. Now, when somebody talks about demonizing cults, making the public think that the cult or group or organization, church, religion, or whatever it might be, has to be burned in public, that sounds an awful lot like Waco to me. Now, remembering this report was put together 30 years ago. They also said if we move into a situation where we have to start diminishing the cost that we do on military weapons and on military armies, and we have to make them smaller because we've convinced everybody we have this wonderful world government and everybody loves everybody, how are we going to keep taking the money from these stupid taxpayers, off-budget money, and all the rest of this junk that we've been stealing from these people for years, conning them, giving these huge contracts to our buddies and our family members to create weapons for so many years? If we don't have that ability any longer, what are we going to do? How can we maintain this control of billions of dollars taken out of the budget? So they decided what they would do? How about if we create these never-ending projects similar to the Egyptians? It worked for the Egyptians. The pharaohs and gods kept the people busy and occupied generation after generation on a never-ending project. So they said, well, gee, what would be a good never-ending project? What could we possibly do that would constitute a never-ending project? They said, well, how about if we go to outer space? Now, that would be neat, because we could go to outer space and try to go to the moon. That'd be a big project. We'd take a few billion and a billion and a billion for that. After we get on the moon, if we have to, son of a gun, well, then we'll go to Mars. That makes sense. Now, if we go to Mars, maybe we can, maybe we can't. But if we get to Mars, what we need to do to keep these jerks on the line and chucking those billions of bucks into the old bucket, of course, we get them all excited about this. You know, we do all that good publicity and everything, get them all excited. But then we need to do a space station, you know, build a little one, and we could build onto it, and build onto it, and build onto it. We might even, if we have to, we'll plan to go to Pluto. Hey, gosh, we've gone every place else. So we have here the pyramids of Egypt, the never-ending project to keep the stupid Americans busy and keep taking their money. Now, of course, we'll highlight all the big points, and there are big points, because we have gotten tremendous scientific advancements out of their studies to go to the planets. But the bottom line was, it's the pyramids of the Egyptians to keep us busy and to keep taking our bucks. Well, what else did they say? They said, you know what, we have to also socially, we'll have to create enemies. If we don't have real enemies, or we've told them we don't have real enemies, we've got to make new ones. We don't have governments now that we have to worry about. Well, the idea said, one idea was we certainly could start chasing terrorists. Create terrorist groups all over the place. Oh my gosh, there's one under every rock. And we'll tell the people we got to start spending a lot of money on that. The brand new CIA director just announced that his prime objective is going to be chasing terrorists and getting rid of the terrorists. Well, we certainly do have some. There's no question about that. I wonder how many of them are being budgeted out of the black budgets of the United States government. More than we'd like to know, that's for damn sure. Well, we have the terrorist thing, and oh, guess what? We got a new guy. We have a new guy in charge of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the military. Well, let's see, what's his background? His background is running the covert and training the covert operatives of the United States government for years. The guys that have gone down and educated the guys in Latin America that we call the death squads. The same guys that have gone in dressed in other uniforms and other people's outfits, gone in behind the lines, killed people and then blamed it on somebody else so we can move forward, or whatever the agenda happened to be. Watch this on a little bit relative to the CIA and some of their operations. Some of their operations and the attitudes of the heads of the CIA relative to going in and training the death squads, showing them how to torture people, pull their fingernails out, put cigarettes out in their eyes. Boy, it's a good thing we got that CIA here, huh? Watch some of this.
The unintended consequences from secret operations have come home to haunt the agency.
They didn't give a shit about the unintended consequences. The President of the United States told them to get rid of that government.
For almost a half-century, the Central Intelligence Agency was the invisible hand of American power. It overthrew governments, created secret armies, consorted with drug lords, and hired assassins.
Well, how did we ever allow this to get going? Well, the secret government. I use that term, and it's very, very apropos. Absolutely fits the situation. What we have had in the United States for years has been the secret government. And it's grown, it's gotten bigger and bigger. We've permitted it. Now, here's what takes place, and any idiot can come up with this and realize, understand what the story is. what takes place when you have secret government, it attracts a very specific character, a very specific personality is going to be drawn to secret government. It's going to be the person with a criminal attitude. All criminals function under the concept of secrecy. So when you have a huge body going in the United States, growing and getting larger on a regular basis, under the pretense of national security, when we can stamp something national security and shut it up and stop it, shut it down completely, excuse me, any criminal at all that can get in on that program is going to jump on board. Then, of course, you have the young guys that are being conned on a regular basis by the secret government. They're being convinced that what they're doing is right. Like these poor guys here. This is an example. You know, many of these covert operatives, the guys that are trained as Delta Force men and are high-level invasion groups, the secret guys that dropped in behind the lines, carried out the most heroic deeds in the history of mankind for the American flag and for the American people, were suckers. They were even bait. Human bait, live bait, sent in by a highest level of government officials. Our military and our presidents have sent these guys in to kill them. They sent them in to carry out acts that they knew they couldn't complete and drop bombs on their heads when they got in there and called back and said, "We are here, we are 500 feet from the camp that we came to hit." And they were asked, "What is your location?" They gave their location or had a transponder sending it out, and we bombed them to death along with the people we were trying to get. For years and years, we've had brilliant inventions from young American inventors. People that moved forward with inventions that would blow your mind, that could help medically in an untold manner. We have the ability to replace eyesight, make the blind see again. We have the ability to have the deaf hear again. We have unbelievable inventions. Inventions for free energy where machines could produce 110% of the amount of energy that goes into them to produce more, so there's actually no negative cost on energy. We've had those for years. But every time somebody came up with a brilliant invention, every time that happened, the government stepped in under some pretense, grabbed it up, and in some cases, they went as far as, like with the Boeing, had some Tesla products they were building. They built a couple of aircraft. They built a couple of vehicles, a few trucks, and a couple of cars, and were testing some of Tesla's energy on these vehicles in the 40s. The government came in and took over some of the scientists that were working on it, engineers. They seized the plans. They killed a handful of people that knew about it, that were not cooperating with the idea of turning it over to the government. So they killed them. Now they had accidents and things like that. You know how that goes in large numbers. Then they destroyed the vehicles, destroyed everything, all the aircraft and different things that were in Boeing's hands, so they could go and, of course, complete them themselves and move forward. Well, this is a typical situation with the government for years and years. Just taking anything that looked like it could be used, particularly if it can be used as a weapon in some manner, take it on and develop it. And then if there's some medical things later on, spin it off to, by the way, to their buddies that are the major stockholders in huge pharmaceutical or medical confabs. Spin it off to them, let them develop it, give us a little kickback, you get this, you get that, and we'll let these jerks have a few of the benefits while we proceed to move forward with the weapons sides of things. Watch this. Here we have some of the original paperwork actually a synopsis, of the original paperwork on how implants within the head actually could bypass, receive signals from outside, and actually receive the brain stimulation so that a person could hear. There's a variety of operations been underway of this for many years. The big point is that you actually could either stimulate sound and sight inside the brain externally by actually putting implants and or bypassing with those implants, bypassing the normal receptors for sight and hearing, or you could do it for either watching, looking, seeing, visually seeing something in your mind without having it come through the eye, or link you up in a manner such that you could actually be spoken to externally with an electronic signal and have it bypass normal systems and go right directly into the brain. Additionally, the intelligence agencies have for quite a while been working on the ability to actually track the human brain and be able to remotely tap in and receive your thoughts. Now, how far this project has gone, I'm not sure. But obviously, that would be really devastating. These are the patents here on the hearing device that can be implanted in your head and actually receive, again, sounds, regular audible sounds, bypassing the normal ear. I have some video footage that I'm going to show you relating to the ability to actually hear through this device, which would be carried around, and you can actually switch it on and off. Now, from a medical point of view, this is terrific, because a person that's not been able to hear could actually have one of these implanted in their head and be able to listen, hear regular sounds by bypassing the ear, even if, for example, if they had an ear that didn't function at all, it would stimulate the part of the brain that actually registers in the microwaves of sound. This is absolutely finished. And of course, again, when you find out that it is done, commonly it means there's another 10, 15, 20 years advance on this, so that they're much smaller now than we ever thought they would be, and you'd never see them. This is some more of the very same part of the same sound transmission directly into the brain, communicating directly with the brain via implants of sorts. This is some of the very same patents, additional pages relative to how it would function, what wavelengths, how they activate, what has to be cultivated or stimulated, and how the external signals could be transmitted directly to the brain for sound and for hearing without even going through originally the hearing vibrating eardrum itself. This is part of the very same paperwork of the actual patents on that equipment, which, by the way, was done quite a few years ago, and of course, as you're going to see, these implants are a reality at this point in time.
Perhaps a miniaturized microphone could be inserted into the ear canal. The sounds might be processed by nanochips and transmitted directly to the auditory cortex of the brain. Sound waves enter the ear and vibrate the eardrum. These oscillations pass along a system of bones to vibrate the fluid of the snail-shaped cochlea. The fluid moves thousands of hairs on the coils according to the different sound vibrations. Each hair is in contact with nerve fibers, which send signals to the brain. This produces a complex electrical pattern, which the brain recognizes as sound. He is able to hear through his cochlear implant, an electronic device that has been inserted into his head. Mike was one of the first people in the world to be fitted with this prototype bionic ear.
The
rest of it is just the circuitry that does the processing for the sound. And I have a microphone right here, so it picks up the sound at ear level, which is more natural, sends it down through this cable to the processor. There it's turned into the digital signal that we use for the processing scheme and sent back up through the same cable, and then it goes from the ear hook here to another short cable to a plug that I actually have on the side of my head, so the wires go directly down inside the ear.
The implant is made from platinum, a metal that can remain inside the body for decades without causing any harm. The signals are sent along a bundle of wires into the cochlea. 6 electrodes on the ends of the wires replace the thousands of hairs that stimulate the nerve cells. These cruder messages pass up the auditory nerve, as in normal hearing. The brain deciphers these artificial signals as sound.
When I unplug this here, right there, it's just basically an electrical connection. And when I unplug that, then there's no sound whatsoever. When I plug it right back in, like that, then my voice and yours and everything else comes back in.
Plugging into an electronic world for the first time can be a weird but wonderful experience.
Lasers, microwaves, vortex weapons, the ability to see at night, the ability to melt human beings with lasers, The ability to possibly have inserts in the mind so that they can not only read your mind but control your mind. How about communicational inserts put in the mind, microchips, so that someone back at some receiving point can actually see and hear what you may see and hear? How about bionics? How about the ability of implanting hearing mechanisms? How about bypassing the hearing itself, the normal ear, and sending transmissions directly into the brain? How about the ability to send a transmission of low frequency, sonic type sound that would destroy your very inners, cause you to bleed to death internally, cause your very guts of a human being to be expelled through the rectum? How about lasers that can be set in small guns, small weapons? How about lasers set on tanks that could scan a crowd and either temporarily blind them or make them dizzy, or blow their eyes completely out of their heads? Can you imagine an army, an entire army, being struck simultaneously with a laser so that none of them could see any longer? These are called non-lethal weapons. Non-lethal weapons. Of course, how about if you're in an aircraft flying at 30,000 feet and they scan your eye with a laser and you're blinded with 300 people on board your airplane? Somehow the front end of that may be non-lethal, but I'm not too sure about the back end. It's about as lethal as it could be. How about aircraft and ships that are stealth, totally non-detectable? We're going to see all of that today. I want to show you all of these things. I want to show you live footage of electronic mind control being carried out and admitted to by the people that are in charge. They don't make any bones about it. You're going to see those interviews. Watch this for the first time. You've not seen information on some of the non-lethal weapons. How about the cooperation with the federal agents, the federal arms being put into the hands of local police? Now, it's interesting. Louis Freeh made a speech in Poland on a memorial, a 50-year memorial a year or two back, on the Holocaust and how it affected the Polish people. And he made an unbelievable statement. He said, at any time, if we see a nation with its federal police, federal military forces, and federal weapons, and federal assistance being cooperatively carrying out and cooperating with local police, we have local police carrying out the will of the federal police agencies, then we have the beginning of another dictatorship, and we must immediately put a stop to it. That was Louis Freeh, the head of the FBI, speaking in Poland a couple of years ago. It is exactly what's going on in the United States of America today, and that is the federal enforcing agents cooperatively working with local policing agents to carry out arrests and kicking the doors in of American citizens. Louis Freeh said that's the beginning of a dictatorship. The same as took place when Adolf Hitler did it. And he's right. The head of the FBI is right this particular time. For years and years, we've been developing these fantastic weapons that you already know about. These are, the stealth bomber, the Marine operations, the Delta Force, the covert special operations groups, etc. I want to show you some of the firepower very briefly here at the front. This is what I call the common firepower, but nonetheless an awful lot of this you may not be aware of. Let me show you some of the special operations group's weapons, some of the weapons that are utilized by the Green Berets and the Special Delta Force and the SEAL teams. These specialized, very small groups of soldiers that can go in at night, drop in with parachutes or whatever, go behind the lines or go directly into an area, and they only go with 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 men. But when they go in, they go with such devastating firepower that it's the equivalent of possibly 100 people or 200 or a couple of hundred people coming in with regular firepower. I want you to watch this now. This is nothing compared to what we now have. This is nothing at all compared to the secret weapons and exotic weapons that the New World Order will have at their command as they move forward with one world government. Watch this. These weapons unto themselves, I think, will surprise an awful lot of you. And then we'll get into the stuff that'll make your hair fall out.
Despite the appearance of overwhelming firepower, an 8-man squad's rate of fire is limited by the amount of ammunition they carry, often not more than 4,000 rounds.
SEALs are not main force units. We don't have civil action teams. We can't come in and build churches and paint schools and do all those kind of things around the orphanages and stuff. Usually when they send us, it's a hot target and we're there to take it out.
Take him, Tracy!
We'll stay within the confines of humanity, hopefully. But it's a dirty business, and the three things come into play. We have to be decisive, we have to be aggressive, and most importantly, we have to be ruthless. There's just not enough of us normally, and when we get there, we have to take care of business.
Wisdom held that Special Operations Forces could never affect the outcome of any conflict. This belief has been reassessed, however, in the face of two historical occurrences: the rise of international terrorism and the military collapse of the Soviet Union. As the emerging pattern of smaller, localized world conflicts brought a timeliness for their unconventional methods, SEALs have continued their training in sabotage and surprise precision attacks, which sometimes could include civilian targets.
It is a different duty, but I think it's a necessary one.
Every military unit is rated for its strategic value to the overall battlefield strategy. One advantage for SEAL units is their proficiency in reaching a destination quickly and undetected. SEAL teams employ a wide selection of different weapons, designed to maximize their value of mobility and small size. This is the Desert Patrol Vehicle, or DPV, used for traveling long distances on the ground. Designed to be airlifted to a forward staging area and then driven to its target, the DPV carries heavy weapons and drives with the speed and durability of a Baja racing car.
Here is a passenger seat, or the navigator seat as we call it, and he has his choice of weapons he can take with him depending on the mission. This here is a Mark 19, which is a 40mm grenade launcher, and we normally carry about 200 rounds for the lower gun here when we're using the Mark 19. The top weapon here is a 50 caliber machine gun. This weapon here shoots a 50 caliber bullet, and that's more of our long-range weapon. And that one will really reach out there and touch them. And as you can see, we have a lot of firepower, much more than just 10 or 15 SEALs can carry in. When you start talking 50 caliber Mark 19, you're laying down a lot of firepower.
Fire!
It's pretty impressive when you see these guns go off on this thing.
And that firepower and the manpower is delivered across the ocean or sea or a bay or whatever with these unbelievable high-powered speedboats, similar to the old PT boats, however streamlined and considerably more powerful and much quicker. They can carry a typical SEAL team of 6 or 8 or 10 men into an area so quickly that the average enemy would not even be aware they were coming. That's one of the best delivery sources of both manpower and this unbelievable firepower that we're looking at. The additional sea delivery of men and equipment is done covertly by submarine.
The submarine is essential for getting SEALs to destinations throughout the world. These submarines are equipped to carry the dry deck shelter, a special underwater housing attached to the hull. The DDS contains the SEALs' Zodiac rafts, or their larger mini-submarines, known as swimmer delivery vehicles, or SDVs. Launching SEALs from a submarine, commonly referred to as locking out, is a time-consuming and complex undertaking. Launcher can destroy machine gun nests, enemy vehicles, and saturate the target with high explosive rounds that send fragments flying at 3,000 feet per second.
48.
Taken in combination, the armament and initial firepower of a SEAL platoon equals that of a 100-man company of regular infantry.
This is the M60E3 light machine gun. It's a belt-fed, gas-operated, air-cooled, fully automatic weapon that fires at 550 rounds per minute. A Navy SEAL handles this weapon by himself and can carry anywhere between 400 and 1,000 rounds. Normally on patrol with this weapon, it's held low at the hip. But when you have to fire it, you bring it right up and fire it from the shoulder. You see a lot of guys in Hollywood movies holding it down at the hip, kind of just leaning back and shooting it. It doesn't work that way. The weapon can be accurately employed as a rifle just by firing it from the shoulder. There isn't any other Special Forces unit that carries a major caliber weapon like this and employs it in such a fashion. There are a lot of stories of these weapons firing into the thousands of rounds without the barrels being changed, turning white hot, so you can actually see the projectiles traveling down the bore, wearing out the rifling, but the weapon keeps on firing and the enemy just keeps on dying. Caliber sniper rifle. This weapon here fires the same 50 caliber cartridge used in the Browning M2 heavy machine gun. This weapon here is accurate on hard targets in excess of 2,000 yards, and that's the way the weapon is most likely employed. We can take out aircraft parked on a runway. We can take out a generator. We can take out the engine block of a vehicle with this weapon here, firing a high explosive armor-piercing incendiary projectile.
The range and power of the Macmillan M88 was used by SEAL sniper teams in Somalia to successfully cover UN forces and prevent casualties.
Rounds were falling all over the outside of our bunker, but we couldn't catch the individuals who were doing it. They would pop up on a rooftop, fire at us, and then disappear. And that was getting, frankly, pretty annoying. So when we saw a guy actually on the sights getting ready to fire his weapon in our direction, we made the call and went ahead and took the shot. I dumped him. The next guy, he opened up on us with a lightweight machine gun. We were definitely outgunned. I swung my crosshairs over onto his muzzle flash, set up on it, and capped off the shot. When I came back up, his gun was spilled over the front of the sandbags, and he was spilled out the backside.
The thing that bothers me about the average American, as I travel across the country doing speaking engagements all over, I'm constantly running into folks that say, Bob, our own soldiers and people that are trained by our own soldiers, our own scientists, they wouldn't do these things against us. They certainly have a morality. There's you can't take an American soldier and ask him to carry out some kind of a deed that would be totally immoral. Our guys just wouldn't do that. unbelievable, naive statement. Let me show you something. One of the worst situations out of many in the last few years was this disgusting event. It took place a few years ago when George Bush took it upon himself, because of a vendetta, a personal vendetta that he had against Manuel Noriega. George Bush invaded Noriega's Panama. Well, you have to understand, which I guess you do, but I have to paint this so you have a clear picture here. Manuel Noriega was a dictator, but he was involved with drugs. He was involved with drug situations directly connected into the White House for years. Sorry about that one. Apparently there was some kind of a problem that took place between George Bush and Manuel Noriega. Some people say it was because Noriega didn't cooperate with the CIA as it related to the Contras. Other people simply say that there was some kind of an argument between George Bush and Noriega relative to drug operations that they were both sharing in. But whichever the problem was, I don't know, but it was a vendetta, a personal vendetta. The President of the United States sidestepped Congress and invaded a resort country, a country, Panama, which primarily does nothing but grow some fruits and functions as a resort nation. You go to visit Panama because it's like an untouched, beautiful little Caribbean island. Not counting the fact, of course, that we have the Panama Canal running through there. Well, what took place is mind-boggling. We sent in a force strong enough to invade Moscow, the Soviet Union. We sent in against Panamanians. Who did we fight there? Well, there were some children there. There were civilians, private civilians. We just killed them. We bombed them, burned them, cut them in half and melted them, cutted them in half and melted them with lasers. It's a good place to practice with some of the new weapons. We sent in a stealth bomber. Good place to practice with a stealth bomber. We sent our troops in and just systematically burned the private homes of the little civilians, the non-combatants. We arrested thousands and thousands of civilians. Not only did we arrest thousands of civilians, we kept them in jail, incarcerated down there, under our command and our guns and our weapons, for as long as a year and a half after the event, and never charged them with anything. It's all right. They're just Panamanians anyhow, right? Is that the idea? Does Panamanian mean guinea pig in some other name, some other country, some other language? Is that what Panamanian means? I don't think so. We sent one of the most unbelievable forces of troops in against the Panamanians. Now, this footage that was actually, for the most part, some of it smuggled out of Panama, is going to show you where they talk about witnesses to the lasers melting human beings. Watch some of this. This is from the Panama invasion. Watch this.
The Pentagon used Panama as a testing ground for newly developed high-tech weapons, such as the stealth fighter, the Apache attack helicopter, and laser-guided missiles. There are also reports that can't be explained, indicating the use of experimental and unknown weaponry.
Nosotros tenemos testimonio de personas combatientes que murieron.
We have testimony about combatants who died literally melted with their guns as a result of a laser. We know of automobiles that were cut in half by these lasers, of atrocities committed by weapons that fire poison darts which produce massive bleeding.
I think there's a high probability that there was a use of sophisticated weaponry merely to test it.
Ramsey Clark, former U.S. Attorney General, has conducted extensive research into the invasion.
Above all, though, there was a use beyond any conceivable necessity of just sheer firepower. Just an excessive use of force beyond any possible justification.
President Bush wanted to make certain that this was going to be a success. This was going to be his vindication, a denial of the wimp factor in spades. So they sent down a force that wasn't going to encounter any effective resistance, would simply overwhelm the opposition, and the fact that it would cause tremendous peripheral damage to innocent civilians on a wide scale, was not of concern in the planning.
What we intended to do was to reduce collateral damage.
I don't know what that means.
Collateral damage, that means if the target is right here, you're trying not to have damage to other places. You're trying to have damage to a specific target because that's a military target, and you're trying to minimize damage outside of the military target. And they worked.
My God, we were sending in artillery and airstrikes against a very heavily populated urban area. There was absolutely no question that there were going to be immense numbers of civilian casualties.
We walked among the dead and saw the tanks run over and crush our dead. We saw a great number of civilian cars with whole families inside. Kids, women, and the driver torn to pieces and crushed by the tanks.
The soldiers passed the tanks over the people's bodies, some of them dead, some of them wounded. And there are cases that we know, for example, the case of Manuel Carro, the case of Alexander Hubbard, and some others whose bodies were totally destroyed.
Reports of U.S. soldiers executing anyone in Panama. We have carefully checked out every such report. And if we think there is evidence that a U.S. soldier murdered a Panamanian, we will court-martial that soldier. That sort of behavior would be absolutely unprofessional, totally unacceptable, and illegal.
Rafael Olavardia, a community leader from El Chorrillo, was taken to the Balboa High School detention camp the morning after the attack.
There were many Panamanian troops at the Balboa concentration camp. They didn't seem to know what was going on. They were sitting on the grass with their arms and feet tied with plastic bands. I, along with many other people from El Chorrillo, witnessed their execution right in front of us. 8 of the soldiers at the entrance were executed by U.S. troops.
Many journalists who tried to investigate on their own were stopped by U.S. troops from entering areas that were attacked. Week of the invasion, more than 18,000 fled from the areas of attack, were forced into temporary detention centers created by the U.S.
Atención, por favor. Entren al campamento y alojen. No estén caminando de un lado al otro. Es peligroso. Por favor, apúrense, entren al campamento. Ahora estamos en una era peligrosa.
Yo vine a ver, allá me dieron que yo podía ver, salir.
Es que nosotros vamos a quedar aquí. Van a quedar aquí.
No, mi tío
no se puede salir.
No, mi tío no puede salir. Mi tío solo, yo tengo que salir. Yo cansado, yo no puedo hacer yo solo. Yo tengo que salir, mis tíos están allá, están
It was a war. It was a battle. And the way you get it over with is to find the people who are most likely to keep shooting at you and try to detain them. And that was the goal of that operation.
Can you imagine that spokesman for the Pentagon telling us that those women and children that they were terrorizing into the concentration camps were combatants ready to shoot against our people? This was the largest practice operation that our troops were ordered to carry out relative to the creation of quick concentration camps and the imprisonment of locals. They took the local people, as you see here, forced them to hold their identification numbers up, their names and their location and date and all of that, hang it before the chest identically to the way Adolf Hitler did when he imprisoned the Jews in Germany. They rounded up civilians by the thousands, even arresting and keeping some of them, total civilians, completely unarmed civilians, in prison and jails for as long as 18 months without ever even charging them with anything. Here typically is one of the raids where they went into journalist offices in Panama and arrested from a list that was already put together in advance, a list of enemies or people that were disagreeing with George Bush. And you have to remember something here. This was absolutely not a war. There was no invasion of another troop or actions against us whatsoever. This literally was a vendetta carried out by George Bush to grab up Manuel Noriega, period. That was it. And that's all it amounted to. The Panamanian people, just the citizens themselves, they don't even have an army of any consequence, for crying out loud, and they keep referring to this operation as a war. It's absolutely outrageous.
Come on, keep the eye on that fucking window. Oh, I got it, Clint. I'll bust his ass over.
Government officials had to go underground, many of them, in order not to be arrested, including university professors. There were former government and diplomatic officials that were arrested and interned at refugee camps, and some of them in prisons. The list runs into the thousands.
Why are they taking you? Ellos, no sé, no me han dicho por qué. They say I have weapons. I don't have no weapons.
Why are they after him? Why aren't they after Bush instead? He's the one who's killing people all over the place. Why are they harassing a worker who's defending other workers?
Don't ever tell me that our own troops have a morality above killing and murdering civilians. What you just saw had nothing to do with a war. There was no war in Panama. Don't tell me our men won't do it. What we have to remember is that when our soldiers are told there is an enemy down the street and they're all wearing black shirts, our soldiers are going to go in and take out the black shirts, period. If they're told that these people and that people and that people are the enemy, our soldiers are trained to take them out. They are also trained not to question the command. And if the command comes from an elitist group that's putting us into a one-world government, and our soldiers are available for application, our soldiers are going to carry out whatever they're asked to do. As we had gotten into producing the video, and by that I mean doing the physical production itself and putting together all the miscellaneous footage and the documentation, in actually July of this year, July of '97, U.S. News and World Report was able to come and actually they did an interesting thing. I get a big kick out of it because I worked on this for so long, and then all of a sudden the regular media comes out with it. They did a cover story on the weapons of mass control. Wonder weapons is the way they describe them. And I want to show you some of that and how some of that actually was put together in this magazine. You know, it is good. I have to give these guys credit. Out of all what I call mainstream media, the U.S. News and World Report will do some incisive reporting still. I don't know how that happens, and I'm not sure, but nonetheless, they do some pretty good incisive reporting. Watch, this is how the description of the very weapons. By the way, these are the very weapons that people were scoffing at when I talked about them 1 year ago. 1 year ago, when I talked about these weapons, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, people were laughing at that space kind of stuff. Well, yeah, that's Buck Rogers, Bob. What's the matter with you? Yeah, what's the matter with me is I'm afraid secret government has now put it together. The story that was done by the U.S. News and World Report is interesting, and it's a good, simple definitions of several of these exotic weapons. I want to be able to point those out to you at this point in time. We talked about a variety of combinations of exotic, non-lethal weapons, which of course the non-lethal being kind of a questionable definition for what we're talking about. But one, for example, is the vortex weapons. Now, these weapons are designed to actually blast out of a vehicle or even from the shoulders of a soldier to blast actually an explosive shock wave. Now, genuinely what we're talking about here is a shock wave of air for the most part. It's the equivalent of let's say if you were close to an explosion itself and had this shock wave coming out from the explosion, you would be knocked over by the shock wave or hit violently by the power of the shock wave going through the air. And this is, in reality, a shock wave of force that rolls out like a donut. Now, if you're hit with this, and then again, depending on how large the equipment is that you're being shot with, if you're an individual, it doesn't take very large equipment to knock you down and completely knock you out. I mean, absolutely knock your brains out, for crying out loud. It's somewhat like being hit by a 2x4 right in the chest or the head, or the chest and the head at the same time. One of the most frightening parts of this is the actual fact that they can include in the vortex ring pepper spray or other chemical or biological products. So you can be struck with this shock wave, this vortex weapon. You never know what's coming. It'd be shot, boom, that would be it, and would knock you over, knock you down, or knock you out. And in fact, if it's one that includes chemical or biological ingredients of some sort, you then, of course, would either come down with the problem, whatever that chemical or biological agent was. You would become ill, sick, or even instantly react to something like pepper spray. And again, depending on how close they are or what type of power strength might be dialed up on this instrument, this particular weapon, you actually could be unconscious immediately, or the chemical biological agent that might be inside of this would and could, of course, actually impregnate your skin, etc. I mean, so this is really pretty nasty. The equivalent of maybe a 600-mile-an-hour wind hitting you, like as in a tornado or that type of a wind that has driven telephone poles through the side of barns. This is the same kind of force you would be getting struck with a vortex weapon. So these are, of course, again, we got to remember now, these are considered to be the non-lethal weapons. And of course, it depends on what you're talking about as to how big it is, how close they are, and what the real ramifications may be of these weapons. Now, that's what they are labeling, again, this is the Vortex weapons. And these have already been completed. They're done. They have prototypes and or even possibly production done on these. We're not sure, but they certainly are a completed weapon, as we will see most all of these are completed weapons. Now we're going to move into the next type of weapon, which is equally as mystical, if you will say, or as exotic as you possibly could have, and we'll be moving into the laser definitions of lasers. We talked about the laser weapons. Lasers, of course, are the light beams, concentrated high-intensity light beams. And, of course, lasers like the old Buck Rogers films with the ability to melt people and blow them up and blow up aircraft and shoot cars and cut things in half and do all those amazing old space rangers kind of futuristic concepts. Well, they're no longer a futuristic concept. This is now completely finished, done weapons that are available and in use. Special operational military groups have used these already. I'm going to follow this with some amazing footage relative to the application of lasers and experimentation in different arenas of the military that have already taken place. But the light beams, which of course the first and let's say the lightest possible effect would be to either temporarily blind or permanently blind whoever is being shot. Now, if you went across the field where you had 1,000, 10,000, or 100,000 soldiers coming across a field, for example, or the desert, and they were the enemy, you could, with a couple of laser units, quite simply blind, blow out, or destroy the eyes and the retinas of the people that you wanted to shoot. I mean, it just makes them totally... You've got an entire 50,000-man army that's wandering around in the desert with their eyes blown out. Even though it may not be lethal, it's pretty much the end of the ball game as far as that's concerned. Now, lasers have gone even beyond that point, and as was shown in the simple diagrams that we're looking at right now, which again were done in this terrific little brief story in the U.S. News and World Report in July of '97, the basic operations or functions of the laser in the blinding effect is that it burns the retina itself, whether it's either temporarily or permanently, and goes right on in and affects the cornea operation, the retina of the eye itself. Again, if you're a military soldier and you no longer can see and you are blinded, well then you might as well be dead, because it's a done deal. You're totally out of the competition. Now, as this might be applied to rioters in the United States or people that were politically not happy with what was going on, any of these weapons can be applied within the United States by United States enforcing forces, and actually have been in a few cases, and the effects, of course, are the equivalent of attacking any enemy at all. If you'll notice, which is, of course, interesting because of the fact that this is a finished product, the M16 rifles have already been converted or have existing mounts where grenade launching shell lasers and the targeting equipment, etc., actually can clip right into existing M16 rifles, converting the standard military M16 rifle into a laser gun, laser weapon, and that's already finished, and the concept of laser weapons. So I'm going to have some terrific live footage included in our videotape here that will show you some of the lasers actually being fired themselves. And when people ask about the ability to protect yourself, protect your eyes, for example, from this kind of a weapon, there is a big problem, and that problem is simply that a certain wavelength of the laser, certain intensity of the laser itself, You can protect yourself if you have the appropriate glasses or goggles. But as soon as a person changes it and upgrades or downgrades, whatever it is, goes to a different wavelength of the laser itself, you're going to need to change your glasses. You may need 15 or 16 different glasses to protect your eyes. One particular wavelength will be protected, but it's altered just a slight bit at the weapon itself, and you have a different wavelength, and you no longer are going to be protected with whatever eyeglasses you previously were using. So it's not easy to protect yourself from lasers, contrary to, of course, what somebody may tell you. All you need is the right goggles. That's not necessarily the truth, and the laser weapon will be a devastating weapon available by those people that would be command of these types of weapons. And as you can see here, the Department of Defense has completely finished and have on hand the backpack laser weapon. As you can see, the weapon is easily carried by a combat soldier. The backpack, which is easily fitted on the back of the soldier, actually contains the power pack for the energy for this laser weapon. And it's very likely that this is the type of weapon that was used experimentally in Panama to melt human beings.
Could these be just as effective for the military, but cause less suffering in the future?
This is a small, portable laser source which is capable of causing eye damage. Now, this was developed to carry out eye surgery. This has 3 lasers in a section here and can be powered from a battery source. And this is quite capable of burning and destroying retina. Okay, we've got a nice picture of her macula, healthy disc.
This is the part of the eye where the laser beams get focused, either to dazzle or permanently blind. John Marshall was asked by the British Ministry of Defense to devise countermeasures, but laser weapons could be made to change frequency continually.
But if you can imagine a situation where you were suddenly confronted with many different wavelengths, or with one laser that could actually chirp between that wavelength, that is, emit different wavelengths at different times very, very rapidly in a fraction of a second, then it becomes very difficult to protect, because now you have to protect against all possible combinations of wavelengths, and basically you're then wearing a pair of completely opaque glasses.
We don't consider this as a weapon that fits into the category that causes, in the terms of the old St. Petersburg Declaration and more recent developments of that law, it does cause unnecessary or superfluous suffering, put into the context of all the other weapons on the battlefield. With a laser, for example, it's very hard to cause collateral damage. With a bomb delivered from an aircraft, that's a more difficult problem, or with an artillery shell. But with a discrete weapon like a laser, chances of collateral damage are much less.
I find the concept of blinding individuals as a humane weapon extremely difficult to accept. One of the most moving memories of my childhood was to see the pictures from the First World War of troops leading one with his arm upon the shoulder of another off battlefields in Flanders after attacks using phosgene, mustard gas, etc. Most individuals, if you ask them what, after dying, are you most frightened of, they will say blindness. And you have to appreciate that if you damage the retina, there is absolutely nothing modern medicine can do to bring back vision to that area of retinal loss.
We don't think that blinding as a method of warfare is something that should be acceptable. And certainly as far as handheld small laser weapons are concerned, if they stop being used on a wide scale, which we can't guarantee they won't once they start being manufactured on a large scale, then we will start seeing blinding being used as a method of warfare, and that is a very serious problem which we want to avoid.
An interesting story was done by the Daily News. It was a front-page story just this year in 1997. It was 2 sides to it. It was not only was it interesting because they were acknowledging that the FAA had some strange reports of some pilots of regular standard airlines actually had been blinded or temporarily blinded by some type of a laser. Now, some of these planes were flying at 7, 8, 9, 15,000, 20,000 feet above the ground, yet this absolutely humorous story, actually, from my point of view, was released in the front of the Los Angeles paper, saying that they thought possibly that it was mischief makers, students, that were actually maybe shooting lasers affecting airline pilots, and that they were using Radio Shack low-cost, high-tech lasers as a prank. Well, first off, it's so ludicrous, it's unbelievable, because the amount of power that it takes to reach any aircraft at any elevation at all that would bother anybody's vision, other than the fact that this picture is a little out of focus. The very idea that someone could purchase a $25 pointer-type laser at the local Radio Shack and have enough power behind that to affect the eyesight of a commercial pilot flying at thousands of feet above the ground is absolutely silly. But at least I appreciated the idea that they had done the story acknowledging that commercial pilots and the FAA have now started looking into some kind of a strange laser that's been shooting pilots in the eyes. Hopefully this is not some kind of a sadistic test carried out by our own government. A short time ago, I was able to secure the paperwork from the Pentagon that you're about to see. It was on a project, they labeled it 2025. This particular program, which they put together actually 95, 96 in that period of time by Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. And of course the bulk of this tries to imply that these are study concepts and that in fact things that they're going to be working on in the future. However, 95% of it, if not more, is finished, completed, or 95% completed at this point in time. This one group of studies, this one is Aircraft and Propulsion, Volume 1 of the New World Vistas 21st Century Air and Space Power Study. The other one is, this is the Information Applications Volume. The total amount of these volumes came out to being about 1,800 pages. This one was particularly on space technology, talking about the satellites and putting weapons into outer space. This was the Mobility Volume, which specialized in the brand new high-tech concepts on a variety of mobility, both in the air and on the ground. This was the Attack Volume. This covered the attack concepts of future weapons relative to space and aircraft weapons that they were putting together. The next group of books continued on was the Directed Energy Volume. This is a kinetic energy study relative to placing kinetic energy and sort of like a laser-type energy as a weapon in both outer space and on ground-based locations. The next volume was the Systems and Biotechnology Volume. Now this got into combinations, even including bionics, the possibility of interfacing human with regular technology, as in microchip and other technology. The large volume you see here was an ancillary volume which did a summary of many of the other books and directions. This one you're looking at was the Sensors Volume, which covered brand new high-tech micro-sensor systems that they're interfacing with weapons. The Space Applications Volume was the last of this group, and the Space Applications Volume was, of course, the application of outer space and moving into weaponry that they're putting into the satellites. This is one half of the total amount of actual documentation we were able to retrieve out of the Pentagon that has assisted in putting together the reality of what you're looking at today. The last one here was the general technology volume, which again sort of did a summary on the high-tech information that they had put together relative to weaponry in outer space. We're going to do with these white papers, the actual information from the Air Force, as in the rest of the tape, as I show you and present some of the actual live footage of some of these completed aircraft and some of the lasers and some of the microwaves and some of the micro robotics that are underway and some of the spacecraft that are already being put together that will turn into a regular full-time fleet of flying craft that will be launched into outer space and actually will function as aircraft up and down on a regular basis. And as we get into some of the actual sensing, the sensors, for example, which will include micro-robotics that can be sent in to a given area to actually send back information, and these things being the size of only a human, a fly, or a small ant, or a spider. And as we get into some of the human systems and the biotechnology, and as I get into some of the bionics and some of the extreme new high energy and energy lasers and microwaves, I will refer back to some of the actual pages out of these Air Force New World Vista 21st Century synopsis studies that they've done, so that you will see the actual paperwork as it corresponds with the physical craft or with the actual weapons themselves. And so we'll be referring back to these as we go in the next second half of the video. As you can see from this, which I refer to as rather standard media newspaper, as of September 15th, 1997, as we're wrapping up the production on this video, in the Space News newspaper, which is in fact a specialized newspaper pressed by Gannett, the Gannett News people, but this is specialized for the Defense Department and related industries, the manufacturers of lasers, weapons, etc., in space and aircraft. The Secretary of Defense, Cohen, is planning and is deciding, probably in a positive direction, to take a test on one of our huge lasers that we have located in the White Sands area in the desert. This is one of the really extremely large lasers. They are actually going to test it in outer space by applying the laser itself and shooting this huge laser up and to attempt to destroy all the electronics of one of our own large satellites. The satellite put up a year or two back to do other activities has pretty well completed its assignment, and they've decided to maybe use it while it's still live and functioning and take this huge laser and actually melt down the satellite while it's in outer space from a Earth-based laser unit. So with the folks that are still skeptical about how far we are with lasers, this is how far we have come at this point in time. Anybody that thinks that they're not already in this far advanced stage, I guess maybe you need to drop a line to William Cohen, the Department of Defense Secretary.
To test fire a powerful laser into the atmosphere. The plan is creating a red-hot controversy. Jamie McIntyre reports.
The Pentagon says its plan to fire its most powerful laser at a military satellite is purely defensive research.
The purpose of the experiment is to collect data that will help us improve computer models used in planning protection measures for U.S. satellite systems.
Sometime over the next few days, the multi-megawatt Miracle laser will be fired from its base in White Sands, New Mexico, for less than a second at an Air Force satellite nearing the end of its useful life. That will be followed by a longer blast for about 10 seconds. The idea is not to blow up the satellite, but to see whether it's disabled in any way.
It doesn't destroy the satellite, doesn't create any debris, and it does not pose any risk to other satellites.
The United States has tested powerful lasers in the past, using them to destroy targets on the ground, and has even fired lasers at satellites in space, but never one this powerful. In recent years, the U.S. military has become increasingly dependent on satellites for communication, intelligence gathering, and navigation. So the ability to protect U.S. satellites while blinding the enemies is seen as crucial in future wars. But critics in Congress warn the U.S. test could backfire, sparking an arms race in anti-satellite weaponry that would leave the United States with the most to lose. Several senators and congressmen have written President Clinton, urging the test be canceled or at least delayed. The Pentagon insists its laser test is not opening the door to a new generation of space weapons, and argues it violates no international law or domestic policy. Privately, the military concedes that with more and more other countries and even private companies launching spy satellites, a weapon that could neutralize them would come in very handy. Jamie McIntyre, CNN, The Pentagon.
It would come in very handy. Well, as we look at the rest of the story, so to speak, coming out of the Pentagon, as we look at some of the paperwork that was retrieved from the Pentagon just after the declassification of some of this paperwork, we find out that they're planning satellite-based high-energy laser weapons and kinetic energy weapons based in outer space, utilizing our own existing satellites, or what would actually be satellites that they have not put up yet, to be able to aim from the satellites back down to Earth. So the importance of viewing this potential, the test that they're doing with a huge laser from the ground base up to destroy potentially other satellites of any sort. We have to remember the point is already planned and far ahead of what we might be aware of, and that is the use of outer space-based laser weapons that will be able to utilize the very exacting definitive global positioning program to fire lasers from outer space back down to Earth, as opposed from Earth shooting up and trying to destroy somebody else's satellite. The big concern there, quite obviously, and this is all in the paperwork retrieved directly from the Air Force that was considered to be secret classified just prior to ourselves getting a hold of it, that the space-based high-energy laser satellites will be circling the Earth in a short period of time by use of global positioning. Within a few seconds at any given time, they could locate their target and exactly strike what they're looking for with lasers that, by the way, as they pointed out, will only take even a half of a second of a shot. In most cases, you would never hear it, see it at all, and it would either totally shut down given special equipment, or it would shut down human beings, period. And that's what we're looking at, is the embryonic status of space-based laser weapons. As we move forward in through the paperwork that we retrieve from the Department of Defense and the Pentagon itself, we find out they have this section that refers to space control, which of course is the basic idea of putting lasers in outer space. The ultimate weapon is the lasers in outer space. And if you control space, you've got your hand on the trigger. then you will be able to control, with the lasers, everything that's on Earth. As we move forward into the next sections of the paperwork derived and taken from the Pentagon and the Department of Defense, we find out that the bottom line on these space-based aircraft, unmanned craft with weapons, is killing. Killing being the objective. Now, there's a variety for global control and global power. There's a variety of unmanned craft, which we will show you actual footage of almost all of these brand new unmanned craft and the new designs that they're working on. Some of these are typical type of a satellite. Some of them are wingless type craft. Some of them are typical long-range craft for outer space control of everything. Global power projection, and that's exactly very much what we're talking about, the control of the world. And as we move forward, we find out that not only are we talking about the singular satellites or craft with lasers and microwaves for space-based weapons aiming, zeroing in, and killing or destroying from the space back down to Earth, but we're also talking about the plans underway for the singular craft, a singular, like a stealth-type spacecraft, if you will, that will have the ability to carry out laser and high energy and also the microwave-type destruction simultaneously in several directions. This is the concept for the craft that will actually be able to handle firing lasers and or debilitating kinetic energy weapons in several directions simultaneously. So it won't take several craft to carry out a small war. Once these units are in place, it's just a matter of pulling the trigger from outer space to destroy the target on Earth. The question is always just going to be, who has their hand on the trigger?
Again, my power seems a little run down. While I recharge myself, I will once again return your television controls to you for a brief time. You may take a break again now. If this is your first break, be sure to take care of business so we have no unplanned interruptions during the rest of the video. Mr. Fletcher will continue shortly with more amazing disclosures. We will show you videos of secret weapons, as well as declassified information retrieved from the Air Force and the Pentagon, and some of the most exciting disclosures you have ever seen. I must take a break now as well, for an energy recharge. My voice seems to be slowing down. Do not take more than 10 minutes, please. All right. So let's get started into the next section. I feel fine now. I hope you are feeling better. Yes, you. Here's Mr. Fletcher once again. Please